Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We very welcome to our all participants for Islam Study Circle. Uh, it is our privilege and we are blessed that Dr. Khalid Zaheer is with us and he will conduct the whole 60-minute session. And the format of this session will be as usual, like each segment out of four will be of 15 minutes. First segment will be related to Quran al-Hakim, and we will be study the chapter 7, Suratul Al-Araf, verse 57, 58, and 59. Then after 15 minutes, we will have our second segment, which will discuss advanced understanding in Islam, and the topic will be use of intellect in Islam. And the third segment will be of again 15 minutes, which related to contemporary issue, punishment of blasphemy. And the fourth segment will be question answer. So question answer session m- might be take a longer time. So that's how we will conduct the session. So ideally, you should have the Al Bayan with you. And if somebody does not have a book, then they can order from online from our Al-Mawrid website, Al-Mawrid UK website. And the last thing for the before I hand over to our speaker, our teacher, um, you need to forward the link for the registration for this class to your friends, family, so that more people can join, can register, and can benefit for this wonderful opportunity to learn our Deen, our Quran, and we can better our lives. So I'm going to request our teacher, Dr. Khalid Zaheer.
Thank you very much, Maratib Sahib. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. I seek refuge in Allah from the evil of Satan, the rejected one. Bismillah ar-Rahman rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. The first segment that I am going to conduct is the understanding of a few verses of the Quran. If you have been regularly following our program, you would know that I pick a few verses from the Quran and I'm proceeding in a sequence. So we are now in Surah Al-Araf, which is Surah number 7, chapter number 7. And I pick a few verses uh, from its different passages to be able to get some idea of what the Quran is telling us and to understand how the Almighty explains His guidance to us. I have chosen verses 57 to 59 for today's presentation. The Quran says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وهو الذي يرسل الرياح بشرا بين يدي رحمته. It is He, God, who sends winds as harbingers of good news, as informers of good news, بين يدي رحمته, before the arrival of His mercy. That is, God's mercy in this particular passage is rainfall. The Quran does talk about rainfall as God's mercy, and indeed it is His mercy. We need water, uh, and it's an acute need. Without water, we cannot survive, and God sends water to make sure that we survive we live properly, and it is His mercy. He says that He sends winds before the arrival of His mercy, that is, before the arrival of rainfall. Now, this wind, the Quran described as bringing good news. That is, the good news of God's mercy is preceded by um, cold wind. It's a cool breeze that comes before it, which is an information for the people who are suffering from uh, particularly warm weather. So it comes as a relief, and it comes with the good news that not long from now there is going to be rainfall. So it has been described as bringing good news of God's mercy, and God's mercy being rainfall. He goes on to say, Hatta iza aqallat sahaban thiqalan, until such time that they gather up the heavy clouds. That is, the winds, they blow and they gather heavy clouds. Suknahu li baladim mayyit. We take them towards dead land, dead soil. That is, we take these clouds towards lands which are dry, where there isn't any plantation, there aren't any crops, because there has been no rainfall. فَأَنزَلْنَا بِهِ الْمَاءَ. Then we send through them water. That is, we cause rain to fall. فَأَخْرَجْنَا بِهِ مِنْ كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ. Thereafter, we bring out through it, through the rainwater, all kinds of plantations. That's the kind of natural phenomenon we quite often witness. كَذَلِكَ نُخْرِجُ الْمَوْتَى. Likewise shall we raise the dead, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَذَكَّرُونَ, so that you may ponder and reflect. That is, we enable you to go to experience this phenomenon so as to give you an opportunity to pay heed to the fact that it will not be a big problem for God to cause humans who are dead to come back to life. Like, it is not a problem for God to cause the dead soil, which is parched, dry, to enable new crops to emerge. In other words, to bring life back to the soil. When there is going to be a need for humans to be recreated, to come back to life for the purpose of accountability, it is going to be not a big problem for God to do so. وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ. As for the good soil, that is the fertile soil, يَخْرُجُ نَبَاتُهُ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهِ. Its plantation is caused to grow. Plants sprout out of it by its Lord's will. That is, God decides that plants should grow as a consequence of rainfall from fertile soil, good soil. That's what happens. وَالَّذِي خَبُثَ. However, the land which is not good, it's khabith, it's infertile, barren. La yakhruju, nothing emerges, illa nakida, except for what is useless, unworthy. Kazalika nusarriful ayat. Likewise, we send our verses in different forms. We cause verses to be revealed in a way that they're that they are causing humans to understand. لِقَوْمٍ يَشْكُرُونَ. Now this is done for those who are really thankful. I have to just uh, make sure that the battery doesn't die down. Give me half a minute. I'm sorry for that. Now, God is telling us that He is mentioning these signs in His verses so that you may understand. لَعَلَّكُمْ, for those people who are thankful, that is, those who are thankful to the Almighty for all the blessings that He has bestowed upon them, they understand what the Almighty is mentioning through it. Now, what is a bit surprising for a reader is the fact that immediately after these two verses, there comes a third verse, verse 59, which is beginning of a long passage that is talking about the stories of six messengers, Rasul, who came in different parts of human history to deliver God's message to their respective nations. And the stories are almost the same. It's basically the same theme that the messenger of God, God's Rasul, delivers his message to the nation, and many people reject the message. And you know, this process goes on. The messenger continues to convince them. They continue to be stubborn, inflexible, and unwilling to pay heed to what is being informed, what is being presented, and then reaches a deadline. And that deadline decided by the Almighty reaches them, then they are destroyed. They are annihilated through one form of punishment or the other. Now, this passage is a very long passage, but the two verses that we've already read, preceding this passage, they cause the reader to be a bit puzzled, you know, to be looking for an answer to the question as to why, after the mention of a cloud formation, rainfall, and as a consequence of it, crops sprouting from lands, some lands giving a good response, others are unresponsive, or even if something comes out of them, it's useless, unworthy of human consumption. Uh, why has this phenomenon been described before the description of stories of prophets who delivered God's message and they received responses which were different? Well, a little deeper understanding and reflection brings the reader to an understanding, to the conclusion that placement of these two verses before the beginning of the description of the stories of prophets is not accidental, is not without reason. How could it be that God would arrange verses in His book in a way that uh, some verses come before others and there be no reason? That is never ever the case. So, in this particular passage as well, there is a deeper meaning which one is able to unfold after one stops, ponders, and reflects. And that's the very idea of having such arrangement. God wants us to reflect, to ponder, to think deeper into the meanings of the Quran. The Quran mentions, Afala yatadabbarun al-Quran. Do they not ponder over the Quran? So pondering over the Quran, reflecting upon its verses is what is an important goal that one must strive to achieve. Now, the fact that the Almighty is mentioning that there are soils which are good and responsive, and there are soils that are not good and therefore not responsive to rainfall. And the water of rain causes some soils to respond by having growth of crops, and there are other soils which do not respond uh, as a consequence of rainfall. That is similar to the phenomenon of God's message getting delivered to people who respond according to the quality of their person, according to whether they are good or whether they are not. So it all depends on whether people are good humans or not good humans. It all depends on their performance. So, rainfall and divine revelation have both been described one after the other in a manner that both are similar. The idea is that, like rainfall, there is a spiritual rainfall that comes through messengers. Rain, water falls on, on soil, and it's the quality of soil that decides as to whether a certain uh, whether a certain soil is going to have good crops or not. Likewise, it is the quality of human beings. It is the soil inside the soul of an individual that is going to ultimately decide as to whether uh, the individual is going to be responsive positively to the message of God or whether he or she is going to respond negatively. Like it happens in the case of rainfall, it's the quality of soil that decides as to what is going to be the response in the form of crops. That is the theme which the Quran describes quite often. It's one of the more popular themes of the Quran. That if you are a good human, if you are already truth speaking, truth seeking, um, helpful to others, always honest, reliable, uh, chaste, positive in approach, fulfilling promises, always making sure that the commitments are uh, properly responded to, etc. When you are a good human, then your soil inside your personality is good, is fertile. And the rainfall in the form of divine revelation is going to give positive results. But if the soil is evil, if it's poor because of the bad performance of the individual, then the same message of God will not have any positive results. In fact, it's going to cause the individual to respond negatively. That is the way the Quran helps us in understanding the different uh, policies, different decisions of the Almighty through the examples of natural phenomena. That was the first part of the program that I had planned for today. The second segment is on the understanding of uh, some important aspect of the message of Islam. Remember, I was talking about the question as to whether in Islam use of intellect is allowed or not. This discussion is actually um, a prelude to a discussion on faith, on beliefs, because the Quranic argument presentation of beliefs is appealing to human intellect. Therefore, it should first be clarified that there is nothing wrong at all in using our intellect for the purpose of understanding our religion. Ordinarily, what I'm saying is quite obvious, but the trouble is that there are religious Muslims who believe that in Islam, intellect has no role to play in understanding God's message and His religion. Therefore, I started presenting, I started this discussion first by presenting the arguments, religious arguments of those people who believe that in Islam we cannot use our intellect. And then I have gone on to argue that these arguments are not are not strong. They are not convincing. So I've already talked about the first argument, wherein people who believe that we cannot use our intellect say that the Quran says that fearing people are those who yu'minuna bil ghayb, who believe in the unseen. And their understanding is that by this presentation, by this mention, the Almighty is saying that God fearing people are the ones who have blind faith. They don't question, they don't ask for explanations. And there was also a mention of another verse which says, uh, believers don't ask questions when the Quran is getting revealed. And I also explained as to why the first argument and the second argument are not are not mentioning what these people want them to convey. The understanding is the the understanding is completely different from what some Muslims are trying to put across. Now, I am presenting another argument which I mentioned at the time when I started the discussion, that these people present use of intellect is not encouraged. They say that you find in the Quran a mention time and again that good believers are the ones who say Sami'na wa atana. We listen and we obey. They say that in Islam you should be obedient. That's what is expected of you. You're not expected to be looking for arguments, wisdom, justification. You ought to know what God is saying to you, and that's about it. There's no need for you to look for uh, understanding of reasons why also uh, it's flawed because the Quran, when it says that good believers are those when they are informed about a certain expectation of the Almighty, they say, Samena wa atana. We listen and we obey. Now, what it means is that once an individual has been accepted as God's messenger, then he has to be obeyed. That's the most natural, obvious, and intellectually sound decision. But the question is, why should one believe in an individual as God's messenger? The Quran, we shall see later, has presented arguments after arguments to the reader to feel comfortable and convinced that if the Quran is claiming the Quran is God's word and Prophet Muhammad, God's mercy be on him, is his messenger, then this claim is based on solid, convincing evidences, arguments. So this this claim that simply because the Almighty is saying that good believers are the ones we hear and we obey, and thereby the need for use of intellect is unnecessary. The fact of the matter is that samena wa atana, to say that we listen and we obey, is a very reasonable, rational uh, approach. Why? Because once you accept an individual as God's messenger, his representative, somebody who brings God's message, then obviously for a good believer, once he has accepted that individual as God's prophet, his messenger, the only reasonable approach would be to listen to what God says and to follow it. If the person is not as yet convinced, then he should convince himself intellectually to be able to believe that the person who is delivering the message to him is God's messenger. However, after having convinced oneself, the most rational decision, behavior, attitude of the individual would be to listen to what the messenger is saying and to obey it. It's not very different from, uh, for example, a case where a student gets admission into a certain university. Now, while he or she is exploring the different possible universities that are available, they have a they have a choice which they can exercise. Nobody would force them to go for one university or the other. However, once a decision is taken that they are going to go for a particular university and not others, then then obviously to ask the authorities to not give them a certain program or a set of subjects that they have to study in a particular semester, uh, they have no choice because they've already accepted the system as their uh, their opportunity to learn. And when they've accepted the system, they've accepted the authority of the system. And they cannot further go on to argue that, look here, unless we understand that these are the subjects that need to be taught in the first semester, we're not going to study it. Most certainly, the university authorities would do well. The teachers of the subjects would do well to help understand why certain subjects are being taught at this level. But obviously, it cannot be a precondition for a student to claim, unless he or she understands why a certain subject is being taught, they're not going to study it. Likewise is the case with a believer, a Muslim, who has accepted the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, as the messenger of God. After having accepted him, they will follow what he says because accepting him means that what he's saying in the domain of religion is actually from God. So this argument does not hold. this ends my second segment. In the next time, in the next occasion, inshallah, I will talk about the last two arguments that are. There are many other arguments, but the more popular ones that I presented, the last two of them, I will take up for discussion and a counter mention of uh, how these two arguments are also not supporting the cause of those who believe that we cannot do our intellect in Islam. The
Yeah,
third segment is a segment.
excuse me, Dr. Sahir, can we have a handouts of the notes of this topic, use of intellect in Islam, and in which you have written the all arguments? We can get it.
Yeah, yeah. Did I not send them to you? Okay. Uh, is it possible? Should I send to you right now?
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, if you can email me, I
Okay,
can
let me.
forward to all class students.
So, can it be that after this presentation is over, I'll send it to you?
Yeah, that's fine. That's
Or you
fine.
want it right? I'll do it later. I'll do it later because I'm not very good at handling these things, while a program is going on.
No,
So
no
I'll do it
problem.
later. Okay. Now, the third segment is the one where I talk about a current issue, uh, which is kind of bothering us, and I I make a presentation so as to invite discussion, uh, so that we understand the topic still further. The topic that I have chosen for today is the blasphemy law. It's a very talked about subject in the present times. More recently, we've had an incident in Pakistan which has caused many people to discuss this subject. And obviously, therefore, there's a lot of interest amongst people as to what exactly is the truth about this issue when it comes to the proper, true understanding of Islam. Uh, as I mentioned in my earlier presentations, you people living in the West, you have a responsibility that as and when you find that there are people, Muslims as well as non-Muslims, who are talking about Islam and they are mentioning things, claiming things about Islam that are not actually mentioned in the teachings of Islam, then obviously it's our duty that we try as best as we can to clarify what the correct understanding is. Now, let me start with a clear statement. Everybody has a right to disagree, but I am making a clear statement that there is no blasphemy law in Islam. That is, Islam doesn't give any mention, any punishment for a person who is guilty of blasphemy. Um, that doesn't really mean that Muslims cannot have a punishment for it. However, even if they come up with a punishment which is going to be in the domain of tazirat, that is, legislation done, law made by Muslims, which is not clearly mentioned in the Quran, Sunnah, but it's something which the Muslims have come up with so that their peculiar needs are met, needs of the society, needs of the particular era. But any punishment on blasphemy, if Muslims come up with, cannot be a capital punishment. It has to be less than that. But why do I claim that there is no punishment of blasphemy mentioned in Islam? And if I am right, Why is it that there are so many Muslims who are very confidently claiming that the punishment for blasphemy in Islam is death? Let me first clarify my understanding. This claim that there is no punishment for blasphemy in Islam because the Quran talks about incidents of blasphemy that were committed by the non-believers. These incidents have been mentioned in the Quran, and not just in Meccan surahs. Obviously, in Mecca, one could argue that because Muslims did not have the authority to implement their law, the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, was not the ruler, was not at the helm of the affairs. Therefore, if there were people who were guilty of blasphemy, uh, they could not be taken to task. That's that's a fair point. But the only thing that I would mention here is that even if this claim is true, which is, as I said, is true, uh, there was no need for the Quran to quote statements of the kuffar, non-believers, that were blaspheming, that really had that a strong element of hatred, of mocking, making fun, etc. But the Quran mentioned them. We recite the Quran and we repeat the blasphemic remarks of the kuffar. Why did God do it? Well, I can tell you, God did it because He wanted us to know that when you are going to present God's message to the people, not everybody is going to agree, and they're going to be very strong, sharp reactions. Be prepared for it. You should be patient, you should be polite, you should be wise in your responses. As indeed the Prophet, may God have mercy on him, was. However, the fact of the matter is that in the Medinan surahs as well, surahs that were revealed in the Medinan society, where the Prophet, may God have mercy on him, was at the helm of the affairs. He was, he had the right, the authority to implement the laws that he had received from God. And they were the Sharia for the public life was implemented in Medina. The hands of thieves were amputated, murderers were killed, those who were guilty of mischief on earth were stoned to death, etc. However, uh, while all this was happening, there was there were verses which inform us that there were people who were indulged in acts of blasphemy. Verse 104 of Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, asks believers, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la taqulu ra'ina. Don't say ra'ina, walakin qulu unzurna. Instead, say unzurna. Now, ra'ina are both expressions which are used to ask the speaker to repeat. Like we say in English, could you kindly repeat? Or may I beg your pardon? Now, in Arabic, it was either Ra'ina or Unzurna. But the word, these hypocrites and Jews who sometimes would come in the gatherings of the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, they would use this word by implying that, they don't understand or they're not hearing properly, that they would prolong the zay of ain to cause it to mean something different, something insulting, blaspheming. The Quran did not ask believers to to punish these people, to get rid of them. Instead, it asked believers to abandon this word raya and instead say unzurna, which means just about the same thing. In Surah An-Nisa, the fourth chapter of the Quran, verse 140, the Almighty is saying that I have already revealed in the Quran earlier, and this was in Surah An'am, chapter 6, that whenever you hear people uh, doing kufr, denying God's message blatantly and knowingly, and they are indulged in making fun of your religion, yustahzau biha, the verses, ayat of God are being made fun of. The Quran says, we've already informed you that when it happens, don't stay there, leave the place. Now, obviously, this was an occasion when the Almighty should have said, had there been punishment for blasphemy, that you know what, get rid of these people. This is Medina, where the Prophet, may God mercy on him, is at the helm of the affairs. But the Quran is saying simply that we've already informed you that the rule is that when there's somebody who's making fun of your religion, just stand up and go. Don't don't allow yourself to continue to remain in a situation where there are people who are ridiculing your religion. The same thing has been mentioned in verses 57 and 58 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5, which, like this earlier passage of Surah Nisa, are asking believers not to make such people their friends. That is, don't make people who are making fun of your religion your friends. They are friends of each other. There are Muslims, I mentioned earlier in some earlier presentation, erroneously have understood through these verses that God is asking us to not make friends from amongst Jews and Christians, people of the book at all. That's not true. I've already clarified. Then there is another mention of blasphemy, which is in Surah Al-Munafiqun, 63rd Surah of the Quran, chapter of the Quran, verse 8, where the Quran is quoting a speech delivered by the chief of the hypocrites, Abdullah ibn Ubay, wherein he said, in an expedition, when Muslims had gone out for engaging in a battle against the disbelievers, at some stage in that journey expedition, the chief of the hypocrites, he said, he said to his people who would listen to him, لَيْ رَجَعْنَا إِلَى الْمَدِينَةِ, when we are going to return to Medina, لَيُخْرِجَنَّ الْأَعَزُّ مِنْهَا الْأَذَلَّ, those who are respectable, worthy of respect, are going to exterminate, force to leave those who are not worthy of respect. And the reference was very clear. You know, he was talking about himself and his friends, followers who were hypocrites or Jews as worthy of respect. And he was describing all others, adal, unworthy of respect. Uh, the reference was clear. But the Almighty responded by saying, قُلْ فَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Say to him, tell him that real respect is for God, His Messenger, and believers. وَلَكِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But these hypocrites don't know. No mention of the fact whatsoever that these people should be killed, these people should be punished, etc. Just a response, uh, a very apt response to the statement made by that hypocrite. Finally, in chapter 60, Mumtahina, verses 8 and 9, God Almighty has clarified In no uncertain terms, the fact that God stops you from making friends and from being good to those people who have opposed you, who have forced you to leave your city, who are your enemies in religion. God does not stop you, verse 9 says, from making friends those people who have not opposed you in religion, who have not forced you to leave your city because you believe in a different faith. So God is mentioning the fact that this entire attitude of responding to the blasphemic attitude of the non-believers, this attitude has to be uh, within the limits of justice and fairness. It should be done decently. We should not overreact. Finally, why is it then that there are so many people who believe otherwise, who think that somebody who is guilty of blasphemy has to be killed? Well, the answer is it's a long answer, but let me mention it very briefly. There is a law of the Almighty which says that those people who receive the message of God through his messengers directly and they go on to reject and oppose it beyond a certain deadline, such people are to be punished by God. And in the case of the last messenger, may Allah's mercy be on him, this punishment was inflicted through the military might of the companions of the Prophet. This punishment was inflicted in three stages. The first punishment was implemented in the second century, second year Hijrah, in Battle of Badr, where all the prominent leaders of Quraysh were killed. The final installment of the punishment was announced in the ninth Hijrah when when it was announced that beyond the sacred months, uh, those who would continue to stay as polytheists, mushrikeen, they're going to be killed. Nobody is going to be spared. However, between the second year Hijrah and ninth year Hijrah, seven intervening years, there were some people who were punished to death because they were prominent leaders, because they were prominent people who had denied and rejected the message of the messenger. And therefore, God's law was to be implemented in their regard as well, as indeed it was done in the case of Quraysh when they were killed in the Battle of Badr. These people, some of them, became prominent because of the statements of blasphemy that they mentioned, so that their blasphemy uh, caused them to become prominent and eligible to receive God's punishment to be implemented on them as and when those acts were committed. Uh, it was just like it happened in the case of Battle of Badr, or just like as it happened in the case of people who got killed after the ninth year. The punishment, ultimate punishment, was announced in the ninth year of Hijrah. Likewise, in this intervening period, there were some people who got killed, and some of them were they were apparently they committed blasphemy, but it was not a punishment on blasphemy that was implemented. It was actually the divine punishment that the Quran tells us was to be implemented on all those people who received the message of God through the messenger of God directly and they rejected it. Their punishment was implemented in them getting killed. Right. Now I am available for the fourth segment of question answers.
Jazakallah, thank you very much, Dr. Saib. Brother Naveed Sayyid, he has a question. Uh, where is that? Yeah, Naveed Sayyid, I have unmuted you already. You can unmute your mic and raise a question, please.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Walaikum assalam.
Thank you very much, Dr. for a very informative lecture and clarifying many of the doubts. Just one question about the this verse. They say that after the incident of what Abdullah ibn Ubay said about Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his own son, he asked permission from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to kill him, to kill his dad. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam just did not give permission that it may give the wrong message to the people that Muhammad is killing his own people, his own followers. So otherwise, the punishment was there. He actually deserved the punishment. That's why Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not say no. He does not deserve it. Rather, he just said that the people, what the people will say. So how you will go about that? And also there is incident of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when somebody was misbehaving with him. One of the companions of Abu Bakr Siddiq asked, if you allow me, I'll kill him. So Abu Bakr Siddiq later on told him, it is not allowed after the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam for someone else. So please, if you clarify on that.
Brother, you see, for one thing, let's be clear that the message of Islam has reached us with we have received the Quran and we have received Sunnah practices in a way that they are completely preserved. There is
Yeah.
no doubt that the Quran that we recite is exactly the same word of God that the Prophet, may Allah have mercy on him, delivered to us, delivered to the companions. Similarly, the prayer that we pray is exactly the same prayer that was said by the Prophet and has been transmitted to us. I've already explained. There is no guarantee about any other source that it is 100% certain. Therefore, I would request when we say that the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay said such and such thing to the Prophet, may God bless him, it is an information. We do not know what is the complete information, complete conversation that took place between them. We will understand that conversation in the light of the Quran, in the light of Sunnah, in the light of other ahadith. We cannot we cannot conclude a principle about Islam simply on the basis of a statement that somebody heard and communicated to somebody else, and it has come down to us. We don't even know what the full context is. That is my point number one. The other thing is that whether it is the incident of Abdullah, that is the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay, or whether it is the incident of Abu the fact of the matter is that they were not killed. Now, I may surmise from both these incidents that the two Sahaba, the son of Abdullah ibn Ubay and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they were under the impression that because of the blasphemy that the two gentlemen, the two people had committed, they are now eligible to be killed according to the divine law, which is meant to be applicable to all those people who reject the messenger. They might have been under that impression. But what I'm telling you, that God's Sharia is not understood through incidents. God's Sharia is mentioned in the Quran. And the Quran is giving us incidents after incidents of blasphemy and is not mentioning even at one place that these people should be killed. So, incidents that come to us without being 100% certain have to be explained, but they have to be explained in the light of the Quran and in the light of the Sunnah and in the light of the other incidents, and they cannot and can never be taken in isolation to draw conclusions about our religion. I hope it clarifies.
Jazakallah. Brother Nazir Ahmed has the next question. Brother Nazir, you can unmute your mic, please.
Okay, thank you. Doctor, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. All three parts are very good, really, and very good information. I have a question about the third part. It's no doubt we have you also presented and so many proofs that there is this law of blasphemy is not as per the Islam teaching of Islam. But the challenge is that the most of the ulama in Pakistan and even the people, the followers, they don't believe on this. Even you can't discuss it even in a gathering of people that it's not in the uh, as per the teaching of Islam. So what can we do? What should be our action plan to convince them, these mullahs, these other people, even I have seen very knowledgeable people and educated people, even they can't believe and they even don't want to discuss it. So this is a uh, uh, big challenge, and even someone talk about this, his or her life is in danger. So your comment about this?
I know you're right. You know what? We are living in this country and we are facing this situation. And that is why, why we are here. Uh, we try to make sure that we are not very loud. We are not mentioning these statements in public so that, God forbid it becomes an issue of security. But that doesn't obviously mean that we should stay silent and quiet and not talk about it at all. It is our duty, it's our moral, religious duty, it's a part of our commitment to our faith that we clarify to the world, we clarify to our brothers and sisters that the understanding that you are presenting of our religion is seriously flawed and it is causing uh, lots of misunderstandings. How should we go about it? Well, let's find opportunities of talking about it. If we cannot talk about it in public, let's talk about it in gatherings where you can see that the discussion is possible. I make it a point that whenever I go to different gatherings in Pakistan, where they ask me to talk on the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I do mention this fact as well. It's such a beautiful part of the seerah that, despite the fact that there were people who were indulged in uh, hurling blasphemic remarks, he was always forgiving, always following the Almighty's instructions of ignoring them, except in case where the Almighty Himself inflicted His punishment, not the punishment of the Sharia. So, you see, one thing that I keep telling people is that let's read the Quran. Let's understand the Quran the way it is. The other thing is that let's keep revisiting our principles of understanding religion. You see, one of the problems that big reason of problems that we have with us is that people understand Islam through incidents, through history. which is a very serious problem. History, incidents, ahadith, if they are reported authentically, are a great treasure. We value it. However, it has to be strictly understood in the light of the Quran and Sunnah. So, we need to tell people that in order to understand Islam properly, we must understand the principles of Islam, the way it has to be understood. Probably by encouraging people to have this kind of a discussion and avoiding making them emotional. It is it is hoped that it's possible that some more people are going to start thinking positively about it. But don't forget that this entire life is a trial, and to know the truth or to avoid truth is a part of that trial. If people are getting stubborn, inflexible, emotional, tell them that they're failing in that. People, unfortunately, have been informed that when they're going to become emotional about the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, that's what's going to bring them the ultimate success in the hereafter. Uh, they should be informed that the success of the hereafter is based on understanding our religion properly with an open mind and following it properly. I agree, it's a huge task, and if we are convinced that this understanding is correct, let's try to play our role as much as we can in getting across the right message properly.
Thank you. Thank you. That is a very good suggestion. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you. Brother Asi Zahur, he has a question, and after that, I have a one last question, and then we will conclude the session. Brother Asi Zahur, you can you can unmute your mic, please.
Assalamualaikum, sir.
Alaikum assalam.
Sir, could you please throw some light
Yeah,
on the
brother, your voice is very low, very low. If you can speak a little bit louder, please. Really appreciate.
sir, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Sir, could you please throw some light on the views of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Bukhari on the blasphemy issue?
What I know about these great scholars is that uh, they were of the view that the punishment of blasphemy is not meant for non-Muslims at all. It's a punishment that is meant only for Muslims. And according to their understanding, the punishment for Muslims is not because they have committed blasphemy, but because by committing blasphemy, they have become non-Muslim.
Apostates.
And because they've become non-Muslims, they have become murtad. They have
Murtad.
left their faith. And
Apostate.
because apostates.
Yes.
And because, according to their understanding, the punishment for apostasy is death. Therefore, they should be killed. However, however, in their understanding, before this punishment is implemented, even if the person is punished because of him uh, committing the crime of apostasy, the individual should be provided with adequate opportunity uh, for him to repent and to say sorry for what he said. And I'm using the male gender because they believe that it's not meant for women at all. Um, so that's what the understanding is, that it's not meant for non-Muslims, A, and for Muslims, it's not simply because of blasphemy, but because of the act of blasphemy, they have become apostates, and they believe that an apostate is ultimately to be killed. But before that punishment, capital punishment, is implemented, the individual should be provided with ample opportunity for him to decide as to whether he would go back on his words or on his expressions or not.
Sir, does that mean that this is essentially under the Muhariba law of the Quran? Does it come under that?
Uh, this is another argument that some people present. Uh, what you asked me was about the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Bukhari.
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Yes, sir.
there is a suggestion that this punishment of death for apostasy, for blasphemy, should come under muharaba, that is, mischief on earth. What is mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where the Almighty says that those people who are guilty of yuharibuna Allah wa rasulahu wa yas'awna fil ardi fasada, they, those who fight a war, battle against God and His Messenger, and they cause mischief on earth, they need to be killed. There are four punishments mentioned. One of them is exemplary
Exile.
punishment. They should be they should be killed mercilessly. And yuqattalu. But there again, the difficulty is from the point of view of the way these gentlemen are pleading for, that the verse says that these people who are punished, they, if they repent, then you cannot punish them. So that before you lay your hands on them and they say that, we are sorry about it, we didn't want to do it, or what we did was wrong and we are, we feel embarrassed. However, that argument that this whole question of blasphemy can be dealt with in accordance with the law of muharaba uh, is weak for two reasons. One, an act of blasphemy, if somebody is indulging in uh, at an individual level, is something which cannot come under the description of muharaba. For muharaba, you have to cause mischief on earth. You've got to cause disruption. Now, somebody might argue that people get hurt and they react. Well, then obviously the disruption is being caused by somebody else. However, the other aspect is, as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, instead of going for the indirect argument, if you look at the Quran, you have passages after passages mentioning the acts of blasphemy that was committed by individuals. And no passage is telling believers to kill them. Instead, it is asking them to leave the place. It is asking them not to use the word Raina. It is saying to the hypocrites that all respect is for God, His messenger, and believers, but these hypocrites don't know. So you see, in order for such an important claim to be made, I think we need to have something more solid and convincing from the text to be presented.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Jazakallah. Now we will have a last question. It may be from our colleague because the name is mentioned Al-Mawrid Institute. I don't know who is that brother. I'm unmuting the mic and you can ask the question, please.
Hello, can you hear me? It's Raza.
Oh, yes. And
Assalamu
obviously,
alaikum, sir.
Allah has the legitimate right to call himself Al-Mawrid Institute.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So well, we are already kind of overrun with time, but I want to ask like two short questions, and you can give me like two short answers. First, if use of intellect is that important, then uh, why was Iblis punished? Because he used his intellect, and he raised a legitimate point. Why should a creature that is made out of better material bow down to a lesser creature? And why should Iblis bow down at all to anybody else except God? And second is, Allah can mention whatever happened or whatever was said to the prophet by other people in Quran, and the prophet can forgive people because they are raising those insults against him, and he in his own person is able to do that. But we are neither God, we are not neither the prophet. How can we let go of that? Because we don't have the authority to just forgive it.
Okay, let me take the second question first. You see, don't forget that the Quran tells us that we cannot kill. If we kill, it is as if we have killed the entire mankind, even one individual. And the Quran has mentioned two reasons why a person can be killed. The person is either a murderer or is guilty of mischief on earth. In these two cases, there is a possibility of the person being killed by the system, not by individuals, but otherwise it's not possible. Uh, the second aspect, the second part of my answer, brief answer, is that you see, when God is saying something and His prophet is behaving in a certain manner, you are telling me that that statement and that behavior is not what should guide us. It is our reaction, our anger, our emotions that should guide us. And what is religion doing for us? Religion hasn't come to guide us. Religion has come to tell us how to channel our emotions. So, when for such an important matter as blasphemy, the Almighty has given His policy, it is binding on believers to follow that policy. And by the way, I'm telling you, when we Muslims behave in such a strong, emotionally charged manner against blasphemy, we are stopping people from coming close to Islam. Don't forget that, as I said earlier, Umar Raziallahu anhu came to the fold of Islam after 6 years. Khalid bin Walid came after 18 years of the announcement that the Prophet was receiving Wahi. Uh, had they been killed, we would have been deprived of two great people, in fact, many others. So let's try to find Omars and Khalids amongst these people who are committing blasphemy. Let's invite them. Let's forgive them. Let's be polite with them. To your first question, I would say that intellect has to be used, but has to be used properly. That is, when you use your intellect, you don't always use it properly. Sometimes intellect is misused. Iblis misused his intellect. His argument that he was superior to Adam may have had some weight had there been no clear, direct instruction from the Almighty. When God is standing right before you, telling you that I am telling you that you bow down before Adam, and you say, Sir, why should I? I am superior to Adam. You made him out of clay, and made me out of fire. I think it's a wrong, incorrect, illegitimate, unconvincing use of intellect. When God is saying something, well, our intellect says, and we know that He's saying it, our intellect would say that that's what the right thing to do is.
Right. Jazakallah. My last quick question will be: is claiming to be a prophet will count as a blasphemy as well? If
Who?
somebody is claiming to be a prophet,
Okay. You see, that is what my other problem with the whole question of blasphemy is. Who is going to define blasphemy? God has not defined blasphemy because there is no punishment for blasphemy. This whole question of blasphemy is so problematic, is so confusing that if you have a law, imagine that a person who commits blasphemy is worthy of being killed, then the next question is going to be, who is committing blasphemy? So people would say a person who claims to be a prophet is committing blasphemy. Somebody is saying raising question about Islam is blasphemy. Somebody might ask, why did the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, marry, you know, so many women, etc.? It's going to be a blasphemy. You will stop people from thinking about Islam, talking about Islam, questioning about Islam. So I think there is no definition of blasphemy. Why? Because there is no law on blasphemy. When God, just mark this particular statement of mine. Had Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam been my spiritual leader, my father, my elder, and nobody else's, I would have had a right to say that, look here, you will not say anything against him, about him, which I will not like. Don't talk about him. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, brothers and sisters, is the spiritual leader of the entire mankind. His message is meant for the entire humankind. This message has to be delivered to everybody. When you will deliver his message to everybody, people have a right to ask questions about him. People will ask in a manner that they are critical. It's only when we will answer their questions convincingly that they will believe in him. My whole problem, worry about this whole blasphemy business is that it is causing humankind to come close to Islam. It is causing humankind to come close to believing in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whose respect we think we are defending by coming up with this blasphemy law. So it's just the opposite, you know. It's counterproductive. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Although I have a counter argument or some example, but it's we are going ahead from the time. We are
I'm
very
in.
grateful to you for conducting this session very successfully. Mostly
Thank you.
students and people, they were very attentive, and
Alhamdulillah.
we are thankful to all participants. Inshallah, next our class of Dr. Khalid Zaheer will be held on 16th of December uh, after 2 weeks on Sunday, same time. And the recording of this session I will be sharing with you on via email and also on our WhatsApp group of Al-Mawrid UK official, which we mostly people will be on that. And also the notes as soon I have available from Dr. Khalid Zaheer about this session of some of like use of intellect in Islam, or if we will request if he has any articles on blasphemy law. So I will share with you as well. And the last thing for the session, the books are available and you can order the books from our Al-Mawrid UK website, and you can get delivered anywhere in the UK, in your house, in your office as well. Again, once again, we are very grateful, all participants, and may Allah give you Jazak Khair and raise your ilm, your hikmat, your danish through the virtues of Al-Mawrid scholars. Jazakallah, inshallah, we'll meet you next session. Assalamu
Inshallah.
alaikum.
Alaykum assalam.